Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Turf Out webinar, the class that goes through the process of removing your lawn and replacing it with a beautiful pesticide-free garden. My name's Lisa Taylor. I'm a garden speaker, an educator, and author, and I'm here on behalf of Cascade Water Alliance. Now, there's a lot to cover removing your lawn and putting in a garden. So we're going to do this webinar in two parts. In the first part, we'll rethink our lawn and we'll learn about natural lawn care practices. So for the lawn we decide to keep, it's going to be super healthy and easy to maintain. We'll also go through how to actually remove that grass, and we'll cover the process of designing and planning your project. Let's get going. All right, so we'll take a look. Here's a typical urban lot, a front yard, the kind you see maybe in your neighborhood or my neighborhood. And frankly, it isn't looking that great. The grass is not very healthy. It's got some patchy weeds and some patchy growth. And just think about how exciting it could be if you didn't have all that grass. You could have something diverse with lots of different flowers that support wildlife, or you could make it look like a wooded area in your favorite forest. Now, the suggestions I have for this webinar are really for a typical, mostly level urban or suburban lot. If you've got steep slopes or drainage issues or erosion, or if you're near a waterway or green belt, you might want to hire a professional. Make sure that you get a plan that will work with your site and not cause more problems. So why should you remove your turf? Well, grass, although it is living, it's really only semi-permeable. Most urban lots are so compacted that they really don't slow or absorb stormwater. It takes a lot of work and a lot of chemicals to keep a lawn perfect and weed-free. And it takes a lot of water to keep it green all year round. So why should you keep some lawn? Well, frankly, maintaining some lawn using natural lawn care practices is super easy. A lot easier maybe than starting a garden. And they don't require any kind of special equipment. And you might have the healthiest lawn ever just by using these simple practices. Lawn is awfully nice for picnicking, games, and gathering, and just rolling around with your loved ones. So getting rid of your lawn, that's a big step. So we always say improve your lawn until you're ready to remove it. And use these natural lawn care practices. So improve your lawn with natural lawn care practices. Super easy to do and very effective. You'll have a very healthy lawn. First, you'll want to mulch, mow, or grass cycle. And that's where we leave the grass clippings on the lawn. Those are like free fertilizer. They break down very quickly and help feed your grass. Let your grass go dormant. Grass has a normal dormancy in July and August, so you could just let that grass go brown for a couple of months each year, and that will help in its natural growth cycles. You can aerate by pulling out plugs of the lawn and top dressing with compost to add more air and organic matter. You can diversify your grass by planting an eco-lawn mix. That is a mixture of non-grass plants that do well in a lawn setting, but they stay green longer, they take less maintenance, and they produce flowers that offer nectar to our pollinator friends. Rethink some weeds. Nature really isn't a monoculture. So it's totally normal to have different things growing in your lawn. So embrace those differences and know that a diverse lawn can also be an attractive and healthy lawn. And finally, just water and fertilize only when needed or necessary. If you do these practices, you may never need to water or fertilize your lawn. Investigate those alternative lawn mixes. They often have many different broadleaf plants, and they're super attractive when they're in flower in early spring. So we've gone over some ways to think about rethink your lawn and ways to improve your lawn. Now let's get started. Let's plan and design our project. So first, you might want to think about the goals you have for your yard. What do you want? And how much time and money do you have to spend? Do you think you'll do it yourself, or will you hire some of it or all of it done by somebody else? Do you want to grow food? Do you want to create some kind of kitchen garden so that you can grow food and herbs to feed your family? Are you interested in attracting wildlife to your garden? Would you just like a lovely, carefree, drought-tolerant garden that just does its thing after it's established? Do you want to plant pollinator plants and include lots of natives to support our native pollinators? So think about some of the different things you want for your yard, and then think about how fast or slow you want to do your project. So you could, and many people, they are just so bored with their boring lawn that they just want to take it all out at once and plant something new. That's a big project, but I encourage it. But for some people, it's a little bit too much. So you might think about one way to reduce your lawn is just to expand the current garden beds you have. You could also sort of have areas that you want to change around your yard, and you'll just tackle one new area every year or so, and that'll give you a chance to get plants established before you have to take on new plants that need your care. So think about all these things, and then also think about what it might cost. I mean, there's some cost involved with removing your lawn and putting in a garden. So think about tools you might need, watering tools that you might need, soil and compost that you're going to add, the plants you're going to plant, actual water that you'll need, because these new plants are going to need plenty of water. Will you need any fertilizer? If you're doing perennials, you won't need fertilizer. But if you have a kitchen garden, you will need some fertilizers to keep those annual vegetable plants growing. And finally, are you going to hire out professional services? Are you going to be renting things? Or will you have delivery fees or that kind of thing? So lots of things to think about as far as your budget. So just begin to sort of write down the things you might need to consider as far as tools and soil amendments and plants and water that you can put into your new project budget. So then when will you plant? So I think it is tempting to just get excited, just rip out some lawn and start putting plants in. But sometimes those kinds of efforts can end up with sort of a hodgepodge of plantings and not a real plan to take care of those plants. And sometimes it can end up just to be a weedy, neglected mess. So I think about planning a design or landscape project in 3 phases. One is assessment. You'll assess your property and your lifestyle. You'll design your different gardens, and then you'll install it or plant. So here's a kind of a thing maybe to think about. It's certainly something we would do over time, and that eases the transition from grass to garden, also allows you plenty of time to make sure you're doing what you really want in the end. So in the winter, to design and make your plan, do all your research. In the spring, you can, when the soil's soft and moist, you can remove your turf either quickly or slowly, and then you can amend your soil. In the summer, like if you're really efficient and fast, you can even plant in the early spring. But often if you've got a lot to work with and a lot of turf to remove and other building to do, you'll just spend the summer building out the garden and installing your irrigation. Because really plants like to be planted when it's cool and temperate. So fall or spring. So in this plan, in the fall, we would do our planting and mulching, and then the plants would have all winter to start to develop their roots so that when the next spring rolls around, they'll be ready to grow and thrive. So think about how you want to structure and plan your project so that you're planting at the right time and you give yourself plenty of time to do your research, your designing, and all the building that you'll need to do to make your new garden. So the first step was assessing, and that is like taking stock of what you've got and assessing your property. And to do that, it helps to have a site map. A site map helps us know about our place. And you have basically three ways you can go about drawing a site map. You can draw it to scale, you can do a rough sketch, or you can do what I like to call a Google sketch. So to scale, that is what it says. It is like the actual property in miniature. You get out your graph paper, you get a friend, you get a long tape measure, and you start measuring out in your space. What we're trying to draw on these maps are all of our permanent structures: the house, the driveway, the sidewalk, plants and shrubs, all the things that aren't going to move in our landscape. So with a scale model, what's nice is we know exactly the space, we know how much space we have, and we can better plan to put plants in their space. It can be intimidating, and if you don't have a friend, it can be difficult to do the measuring. So you might just do a rough sketch, and that will include all of the things and their approximate relationship, but they're not exactly to scale. But this will give you a pretty good idea, especially when you're just doing your assessments for sun, soil, water, and air, and you're identifying your landscape zones. A rough sketch is absolutely adequate. Now, once you get to designing your garden spaces, then you will probably want to move over to a scale drawing. But you might only draw a scale garden drawing for the garden that you're designing, not your whole property. I love this idea, and that is the Google sketch. It's sometimes hard, even with a rough sketch, to really get an idea about how things go. So go to Google Maps, go to the satellite view, find your house, and take a screenshot. And then you can take it into your computer, put it up on your monitor. You can put some tracing paper up on your monitor, and you can trace out all of the things, as well as which is kind of cool, you can also do some of the shadow of the canopies that show in the Google Map photo. So get a site map created, get it pretty close to what you think is out there, and then take it outside and walk around and add anything that you have missed. Now, once you get a really nice, clean, good, satisfactory site map, I want you to outline it in a marker, or like a fine tip marker, and then make many, many copies. You can use these blank copies to do different assessments. You can use them to do different sketches of different ideas you have, the most fantastical and the most restrained. So you can use all these different maps to really envision the kinds of things you might want to create in your space. Now it's time to assess. So we want to identify the different growing conditions that are on our lot, in our property, and that we often call those microclimates. And those are little discrete areas that have discrete weather or climate. And so what we're going to do is we're going to assess the sun, the soil, the water, and air throughout our yard. So sun, I like to assess my sun every few years just to see how things have changed. And I like to do that sometime between late April and August. That's kind of when we have the sun at the highest, and it's going to give us the best idea of our summer sun. You can also assess the sun in the winter so that you can get an idea how things change. What I do is I pick a sunny day, and then I just start at the beginning of the day and I look out at the area that I'm assessing and I draw where the sun and shade are, and I check it every hour and I total up my sun for those areas. Now it takes a lot of commitment and follow through to do that all day long. And I have noticed that there are some computer programs and websites that you can put in your zip code and they can give you any time of the year, sort of the sun and shade possibilities in your yard. So that's pretty cool. Something that you might want to check out. Now, soil, you may have different soil in different parts of your yard, and we're going to definitely talk a little more about soil as we get along in this webinar. But you'll want to make notes about soil. Some will be hard and crusty, others will be soggy, some will be sandy, some will be hard packed, some will be loose and easy to dig. So make notes of all the different places where you think you might want to put a garden, and if you don't know what the soil is, dig around and see what it looks and feels like. Water, we're talking about like water from the sky, how it reacts and acts on your property, but also think about how you're going to get water to your new plants. So make sure on your maps you're going to identify where your hose bibs are, where any downspouts are, and also any places where it's really soggy at different points of the year, any places where maybe it ponds but then does drain. These areas might be ideal for some rain, stormwater, or rain garden features. And finally, air or wind. And I know that whenever I read about this, it always seems a little bit confusing. Like it's either windy or it's not windy. But you know, in urban settings, the air really behaves differently than when we're out somewhere and there aren't a lot of solid structures around. So as the air moves through your neighborhood, it squeezes and goes through between buildings and widens out. And so there'll be little air channels or wind tunnels on your property that you may not have noticed because you haven't been out there like really thinking about it or trying to feel it. So I like to go out on a very calm day and look for the air or wind. I'll feel it with my skin, but I also look at plants to see, like, it is not windy, but those plants over there are moving. So clearly that is an area where a lot of wind goes. Wind will go around trees, around and over fences, and that kind of thing. So really see if you can figure out where the strong winds are. Wind is desiccating. It dries out the leaves of young plants, so it can make it hard on new transplants to really get started. It's not that you can't plant in the air or a windy spot. It's just that you'll need to remember that those plants are going to need a little more of your care. So you might use a different map for each of these elements, or you might put it all on one map, but it's going to start to help you see that you have different discrete areas that have different conditions that will need plants that like it in those conditions. So you'll find your shady spots, your very sunny spots, your dappled shade spots, places that are wet, places that are dry, and all the places in between. Once we identify those microclimates, then it's easier for us to find the plants that'll match those so that everything can thrive. But just getting your sun, soil, air, and water assessed is only part of your site assessment. Now you need to see how people use your site. And this we will assess our landscape zones. Now you might have heard about zones, and those are the USDA hardiness zones. Those are about how cold it gets and what plants can survive the cold. Landscape zones have to do with how people and animals use the space. And we're all different. So everyone uses their space differently. So it's good to assess how your family and animals that might live with you use your space. So these are the outdoor spaces, and our zone 1 is our outdoor living space. That's a space where we find ourselves all the time. It's when we're outside, we spend most of our time in these areas. These are great spaces for plants that need a lot of care. Container gardens, our seedlings or transplants, any kind of vegetable plants, they would love it in our zone 1. We're already there, so we can see when things need our help and we can take action. Number 2, zone 2 is really the outer edge of our living area. It's going to be a little harder to get out there, but it's still a good spot for larger gardens, for fruit trees, for herbs and other things we're growing. Maybe even annual flowers would be nice there. A shed, a compost pile, a chicken coop. All places would be great in zone 2 because it's easy to get to, but it's just a little further off. It's not right there, right in the middle of our outdoor living space. Zone 3 is a space for our large garden. That's that big rectangular space way out in the backyard, or a big orchard out further on in the backyard. It's a place where it's going to feel more like work to go out there. But it's an excellent place for perennials and perennial edibles, large scale gardening, and orchards. Zone 4 is a great place for minimal care. So this is a great place for wildflower borders, for drought-tolerant plants. These are places where we're just going to go maybe a couple times a year to harvest or mulch. But otherwise, we're just going to enjoy those plants out there in zone 4. This would be not a great idea to put high needs plants in our minimal care zone. We just probably won't get out there to take care of things, and they won't do very well. And finally, zone 5, that's our area where we hardly ever go, if we ever get there. It's behind the shed. It's way out in the back corner, around the side of the house where it's slippery and hard to maneuver. These areas, don't forget about them just because you don't go to them. These are great areas to leave unmanaged as sort of wildlife borders. These are great places to let wild plants grow and to let creatures use those spaces how they will. So assess your site for sun, soil, water, and air, and also how you use your space. Now you're going to be able to figure out the best place to put those high needs kinds of plants like your kitchen garden, and where to put the things that really don't need your attention after they're established, like your drought-tolerant border, your native plant beds, and your wildlife plantings. Now it's time to design. Now, before we get into making plant lists or anything like that, it is difficult to start to make a design if you're not a designer. It's hard to take that blank site map and start to envision what your current yard can become. So I want to talk a little bit about ways you can get inspiration about your design and what you can do to change your yard now that you have removed all your turf. So getting inspiration by just looking around in your neighborhood, in other neighborhoods, on your way to work. If you see beautiful gardens, pull over and walk around a little bit, look and see what they're doing, and get some ideas about different design things you can do. I love walking around. It's sort of amazing how in a neighborhood, there'll be all grass lawns and then suddenly a little cluster of homes that have taken out their front yard and are doing all kinds of different things with them. So get inspiration in your neighborhood, but also visit botanical gardens and display gardens. Remember, there's lots of different free classes or other classes that you can take to learn about design. And you can think about different things you'd like to include in your design, things you'd like to have in your garden. So let's talk about rainwater, or more importantly, stormwater. If you, and we are having lots of big rain events now, if you notice that there's a lot of water kind of at the foundation of your house, that you've got a crawl space that sometimes gets water in it, you might want to consider adding some design elements that will move water away from the foundation of your house and hold it, sequester it so that the rainwater can be absorbed into your soil and refresh our aquifers. So you could do a rain garden, and a lot of us have heard about this, and we see them around. And these are basins that allow water to come in, and they're planted with plants that like it in that basin or on the side walls or up on top of the bank of the rain garden. But this is a basin that you'll move water from your downspout into the rain garden. It will stop in the rain garden, it'll hold in the rain garden, and slowly it will drain. And so rain gardens always drain. They're not a pond, but they're a way to slow rainwater so it doesn't just run off your lawn and into the sewer, or just go down your downspout and into our sewer. Big rain events overwhelm our stormwater system. So if we can slow rainwater down or stormwater down, hold it in our yards, we can actually be a real benefit to just the utilities and our whole community. So a rain garden, that's one type of way to slow stormwater. But contours, anytime you can take a flat lawn and give it contours, that also slows down the water. So some people like to just make a raised berm or bed that rainwater can go up to and slow down and be absorbed. You could also do a swale, which is a longer kind of rain garden, kind of like a stream bed. Or you could make a stream bed. I love it when I see from the downspout, they've unhooked the downspout, the water goes in a dry stream bed to a basin like a rain garden. That looks great in the landscape, and it really helps. It helps your house because it's moving moisture away from your foundation. It helps our stormwater systems because it captures and keeps stormwater on our property, and it's going to help your soil and your future plantings because you will have a great access to moisture deep in the ground when you slow things down. So thinking about a rain garden or stormwater features, that's something you can go and see those actually in action at a lot of demonstration gardens and pea patches in the area. You might want to plant with native plants. Native plants, they do great here. Obviously, they're of the area. They support our native pollinators, and they're beautiful. And a lot of them like the shade because they grow under canopies of in our native forests. So if you've got a lot of shade, there may be some native plants in your future. Native plants like some mulch, and they're going to need to be established. But once they're established, they are virtually carefree. So think about natives as something you can add. And there's lots of places to go and look at native plants at some of our botanical gardens, and there are some great native plant nurseries, and Washington Native Plant Society is an excellent resource for finding plants and using them and designing with them in your landscape. Now, a lot of us like plants that are sort of carefree. You plant them, you get them established. After a couple of years, they don't need us. And those are the drought tolerant plants. And there are a lot of drought tolerant plants that are beautiful. Some of them are edible, and they are easy to have in the landscape, easy to establish, and then really not a lot of care after they are established. With native plants, they're just designed to go a long time without water, but it doesn't mean that they don't need some water. So if you do put some drought tolerant plants in your landscape, you will need to get water to them for the first couple years. But after that, they should be good with some mulch. And if you've got some rainwater features going on and you're holding some water, they'll be able to go down and access some of that water deep in our soils. So drought tolerant plants are great. Some that I really like are the culinary herbs. Some of those Mediterranean herbs like rosemary and sage and thyme, lavender. Those are all wonderful plants. They can be out in the far edges of our landscape. They don't need a lot from us, but they can give us some in return because we can go out and harvest those every once in a while and either dry those herbs or we can use them fresh in our dishes. Now, I was talking about shade and native plants, and I will say this, that a lot of us, we move into a place and it is bare. It is just the grass and a couple of shrubs, and we feel sort of exposed, so we start to plant more things around our landscape and around our property to give ourselves a little bit of privacy, to create that oasis that we all love, some place that it's sort of a private retreat. But those trees and those plants, they end up growing, which is what we hope, and they create a lot of shade. So a lot of people really struggle with being able to grow a lot of things that they might like to grow because they have so much shade. So there are some fantastic plants that love the shade. Some of our native plants, they love shade, but there are many other native plants. So there's at the Elizabeth Miller Library, there's a thing called Great Plant Picks, and you can go in there and you can look for shade plants. Now, part shade, they get some sunlight, but full shade plants don't get any sunlight. And there are some plants that will just love that. They'll grow anywhere in the landscape. And so things like lemon balm, feverfew, sweet Sicily, mallow, they love it, shade or sun. So sometimes watching what grows on its own in your deep shade places can inform you what kinds of plants might like it in the deep shade. Now, we talked about helping pollinators and wildlife, and planting pollinator patches is a fantastic way to design your garden. Some perennial beds that have flowering plants that are beloved by our pollinators is a great way to support all of the bees and pollinators that live in our area. And they, just because you have a little patch doesn't mean that's all that the pollinators are using. Actually, there are no boundaries between you and all the rest of your neighbors. So pollinators, they use what they need in all the different yards in your neighborhood. This year, we created a bog in our front yard, and we had a muddy patch as part of this small bog that we created. And we were amazed and delighted at seeing so many solitary wasps. The mud daubers were there every day, and we loved watching them. And then I noticed when they took off from the mud to go back to their nesting site, they never went to our yard. They flew away. They flew across the street. So we had a water feature in our yard, but many yards all around us benefited from that water feature because insects found it and they came from all over and they used that resource and took it back to where they were using, nesting and where they were living. So think about not only plants, but some things that pollinators love, which is, water features and mud, some damp soil is really important for many. Also, a lot of our pollinators like to nest in old, dry stalks. So leaving some mess in your yard, some wild areas in your yard really will help the pollinators to find a place and be able to make your yard their habitat. And finally, what about people? We're feeding all kinds of insects and pollinators and that sort of thing. Let's feed ourselves. So think about if you're going to be taking out some different plants or trees in your landscape, you might think, what could I put there that I could eat or my family could eat and create more of an edible landscape? So if you were taking out some azaleas or rhododendron, which don't feed people, they're beautiful to look at, but they don't feed people. If you're taking those out of your landscape, think about maybe some blueberries. They would love to be where your rhododendron used to be. So if you like blueberries, you could have a little blueberry patch rather than the rhododendrons. Think about fruit trees and vines and canes. I also really love thinking about some of these unusual perennial edibles. They're not unusual, but they're unusual to think about them in the landscape because normally we would use rhubarb and we might plant it in the vegetable garden, but it is gorgeous in the landscape. It likes it from sun to very light shade. Even we've got some even in deep shade, and it seems to be doing really well. Artichokes are gorgeous. The big leaves, they've got great texture and they've got a silvery color. So think about those kinds of perennial edibles that you might be able to put in your yard rather than something that isn't edible. And finally, you might, as you're planning, think about a kitchen garden. So far we've talked about, how to slow rainwater and how to incorporate native plants, drought-tolerant plants and shade plants, things that pollinators like, perennial edibles around our landscape. But how about a couple raised beds or some containers full of vegetables? There's nothing like homegrown vegetables. So as you're making your plan, think about zone 1 areas. And is there a place maybe for a raised bed or a group of containers that you could grow, some lettuce, some cilantro, maybe some kale or a tomato plant? That would be just great. Now, the nice thing, so raised beds, they're going to need to be in the ground. They're going to need, they're kind of a semi-permanent feature. They don't have to be boxed. They could just be mounded, but they are going to be a thing that needs to have soil and needs to have full sun, which is 6 or more hours of continuous sunlight. You may have in your assessment found some sunny zone 1 spots that don't actually have soil. And those are great places to consider a container garden. Now, a container garden isn't just one container sitting out there. It's usually a group of containers, 4 or 5 containers clustered together, and all of the plants in those containers need the same kind of care. So it's easy to care for them because you go over to the cluster and you water or you care for all of them at once. You can space them out so the plants have plenty of space to grow, but this might be a nice thing to do to add some more diversity in your yard by creating a little container garden somewhere where there isn't any soil. So that should give you some ideas, some inspiration to get going with your design. And now you're ready to get started and make your plant lists for your different microclimates. So you know your microclimate. So now it's time to start making a list of plants that go in the different microclimates. So I have some shady areas, I'm sure you do. And so I just started putting together a little list of plants that do well in the shade. I have some ground covers because I like those to kind of cover the ground and crowd out any weeds, and they'll keep my soil protected. And then I like to have plants of different heights and shapes so that I'm not just going from ground cover to giant tree. I've actually got some stair steps, some layers, and that it looks great and it provides safe passage for birds and other wildlife through my landscape. Now, once I have this list, then I can use this list as kind of a palette as I plan and plant my different shade areas. Now I sketch up my design, and I'm going to definitely do it in a scale drawing at this point. So I get my graph paper out and I draw my area. This is along the side of my house. I'm going to keep a plant-free zone right up along my house. That's always good to keep pests and other things out of my house, and also to make sure that I have no water seeping down near my foundation. So I have a plant-free zone, and then I have a very narrow bed that I will plant, a large wood chip path, and then another shady bed that's a little wider that will accommodate a number of plants. And what I end up doing, rather than like making it look like an interior design, I want to make it look a little bit more natural, like nature would have designed it. And so I can either do things in great drifts, so many of the same plants in one area that blend into another section of different plants, but they're all the same. So we just kind of have like a wild prairie kind of planting where one thing bleeds into the next, and that's great. I like to do the sort of clump and gap mosaic, where I take several plants and group them together. And I just sort of rearrange the groupings so that they're changed, but all the plants are the same, but my groupings are slightly different. And I leave lots of spaces between the groupings, so the plants have space to grow and the ground covers have space to spread out and cover the space. So draw up your sketch, and it won't be one sketch probably. You'll have time, and I encourage you to draw many sketches. If you're not ready to even jump into this part, I encourage you to go get some inspiration. Go out to demonstration gardens, walk around your neighborhood and see what other people are doing. Go to pea patches and botanical gardens. Go to garden talks and walks, and get lots of ideas of different things, and collect lots of ideas and lots of different things, and then begin to play around. Hey, here's a great idea. Once you get an idea about a few different plants that you like, and you want to sort of play around with how you are going to group them, you can actually go to the nursery and gather up a few plants and go find a little spot and set them up and move them around and see how they look to you when you really have the plants in front of you. So that's a great idea, a super fun time. And I think the nursery staff, as long as you're respectful, they'll get a kick out of what you're doing as well. So after you've got your plan, or as you're making your plan, you're going to want to get ready or get started removing your lawn. And, you know, there's basically two different ways that you can go about it. There's a quick way, remove it straight away, or a more slow approach. And so I want to go through the two approaches to removing your lawn, and we'll start with quickly. There really isn't a lot of mystery about removing your lawn quickly. You're just going to dig it up. There's a couple of ways you can go about it, though. And one is using your shovel. So with the shovel method, you're going to go out with a spade, and you're going to cut out your area, and you're just going to cut through about this deep, just through the roots of the sod. Then you're going to get your spade underneath that sod, and you're going to slice and slice and slice and lift and slice. And pretty soon you will have loosened all the sod, and you can just lift up whole pieces like carpet squares. Now, I can say it and it sounds so easy, and I'm ready to go out there and do it, but just know that this is very bio-intensive. It does take a lot of effort, but a lot of people garden because they want to get exercise and be outside getting fresh air and natural sunshine. This is a great technique if you're expanding your beds just by a foot or two, or you're just going to remove a small area. Probably not the method to use if you're going to remove your whole lawn. Unless you have a lot of spades and a lot of friends, then you can do this, and you will be garden fit by the time you're ready to plant your garden. Now, if by hand or by shovel is just out of the question, you can rent a sod cutter or hire a company that specializes in sod removal. Now, a sod cutter is a machine. You're going to need a truck or a trailer to haul it from the rental space. But I tell you, watching a sod cutter remove sod is a beautiful thing. You just mark out your area that you're going to be cutting, and then you start running the sod cutter. And the way the sod cutter works is it has a blade that is slicing very quickly just underneath your sod, right underneath the root zone, and it just cuts very quickly, and the sod just rolls up in pieces. It is amazing. So if you're interested in removing all the lawn in your front yard, and you've got everything planned, and you're ready to go, then a sod cutter is definitely worth the time and effort and money, because you will finish the project quickly and be ready to move on to making that fabulous garden. Now, whether you do it by hand or by machine, you're going to end up with a pile of sod that you need to do something with. And, they really don't want you to put a ton of sod in your curbside recycling. So, and frankly, the good news is that composted sod makes incredible soil. So, you can use the sod to make raised garden beds, like a sloped berm or a raised planting bed, or you can pile it and just let it compost, and then use that compost to amend your soil. Here's what you're going to do, whether you're going to put it as your the foundation for a raised or mounded garden bed, or whether you're just building a sod pile. First, you flip the sod upside down so it's root side up, grass side down. Really water those layers as you build it so that they're wet like a wrung out sponge. Cover it so it's dark but not airtight. So if it's a compost pile, you cover it with some black plastic or a tarp. If it's for a garden bed, you'll cover it with mulch or soil. And I want to use quite a few inches of mulch or soil if I'm going to do a garden bed, because I just don't want any light to get to that sod and encourage it to grow. So I would do like 6 to 12 inches of mulch, and maybe 6 to 8 or 10 inches of soil for my garden bed. And then I will wait. With a garden bed, I can cover that sod and dig in as long as I don't disturb the sod below, and I just plant into the soil that I've mounded on top. But just remember that that sod is going to be a byproduct of your turf removal when you do it quickly. But it's an excellent resource for building soil around your new garden. Now, some of us, we have plenty of time and we really are interested in removing lawn, but we'd love to save all of that labor. And frankly, some of us just really don't have the ability to dig out the sod. So there are a couple of ways that you can remove your lawn or your grass more slowly. And these are techniques that are going to take quite a bit of time. But if you are following that plan that I mentioned earlier, where you're planning and designing in the winter and removing turf in the spring and planting in the fall, then you will have time to remove the lawn in one of these slow methods. Now, these methods really rely on covering the sod and killing it that way. So we have solarization, so we could solarize it. And this one, we're going to use heavy duty, non-biodegradable layer, a sheet of heavy duty black plastic. And we're going to cover the grass and weigh it down, and then let the sun and time do its job. And when the grass is dead and the roots are lifeless, we remove the black plastic, we amend our soil, and we plant. Now, this can take 4 to 6 months, and it's best done for the bulk of it to be in the summertime. So to put down those layers in spring and leave that black plastic through the summer and into the fall is the best time for solarizing. You can smother it. And there's a classic technique we call sheet mulching. And that's where we cover the grass with a layer of paper. It's a biodegradable layer. It's going to decompose. And we cover that layer of paper with chips. And then we cover it with this deep mulch. And it looks something like this. A lot of people will use cardboard for that layer, but many people are concerned about cardboard, the forever chemicals that might be in cardboard. So one thing I can recommend is that you can use landscaping paper, and it's a very heavy craft paper. You could use 1 or 2 layers of that, and that is OMRI certified. OMRI stands for Organic Materials Review Institute, and that means that that landscape paper is approved for organic agriculture. Now, some people just don't want to deal with any of the layers at all, and so what's great about sheet mulching and the next technique I'm going to show you is that it kills weeds and improves the soil. So with solarization, it just kills, it doesn't really improve. You just want to remember thick sheets, thick mulch, plenty of moisture, and give it time. Now, there's a new technique or another emerging technique that we call deep mulch. And that's where we just dispense with the sheets altogether and we just shave the grass to the ground and we pile the mulch high. So you'll take mow your lawn as close as you can, and then take a string trimmer and shave the grass to the dirt. It will be nothing. And that is important. Then on that shaved ground, you're going to pile at least a foot or 12 inches of wood chips. You'll wait 4 to 6 months, and when the grass is dead, you can move the chips and amend and plant. There is a warning, though, and a lot of people just hear this like, oh, you can just put wood chips down and cover your grass and it'll kill it. But that's just only part of the story. So you really have to follow the instructions for deep mulching precisely. 12 inches at least of the mulch. So it's good to get a measuring tape out there and make sure you've got it deep enough. And you really have to shave the grass to the dirt. So this is an area, I saw a big pile of chips on it. And the next thing I knew, they had just spread it out over the grass. The grass hadn't been cut or shaved or anything. And sure enough, pretty immediately, the grass started growing. And when I dug down into this mulch, it was only about 3 or 4 inches deep. So it's important that you, if you're going to deep mulch, that you really follow the instructions precisely. Otherwise, you'll have a bigger problem on your hands. So those are the 3 ways to remove your grass more slowly. Now, 2 of our methods really require wood chips as a mulch, and you may want chips for mulching around your new plantings. You can get chips for free through Chip Drop. That is a service that connects arborists with gardeners, arborists who have chips with gardeners who want them. Oh, it's a beautiful program. You do really need to read about it and learn about it and ask other people about it because it is a massive pile. But keep an eye out because sometimes in your plant share group, you might find somebody who's got a chip drop who invites folks to come and get some chips to help them out. So it's easy to get chips for free, but it's a lot of chips, so make sure you have a plan for it. If you just need a yard or 2 of chips, then look for a service that delivers smaller amounts of chips for a fee. All right, so we have covered all of part 1. We talked about why you might want to rethink your lawn. I went over some great natural lawn care practices so that the lawn you do keep is going to be healthy and vibrant and easy to care for and not require water, fertilizer, or anything else. We also talked about how to plan your project and to design it, how to do it in phases, assess, design, and then plant. And then I talked about how to get started drawing some of your design ideas on your site maps. And finally, we talked about the quick way and the slow way to remove your grass. The quick way, it's physical, it's manual. You do it by shovel, you do it by sod cutter, but you can, in a short period of time, rid yourself of lawn and get ready to put in your garden. Now, if you're not ready for that or not really willing to put in that kind of work around getting rid of your grass, so you'd like to save the work for really planting your garden, then I showed you 3 ways that you can sort of suffocate the lawn and kill it and remove it that way over time with a lot less effort. And that's the end of part 1 of our Turf Out webinar. In the second part, we'll show you how to get your system set up and get your new garden planted. My name's Lisa. I'm a garden speaker and educator. I'll see you in the next section.